America is trying something new. Yes, the United States this week decided to conduct a foreign policy pilot program. Venezuela. No coups, no takeovers, no friendly replacements in leadership. Just a different kind of lab experiment. And guess what? We're the control group. No safety goggles on this one. So grab your Bunsen burners and your beakers and let's get teed off. Welcome back to Teed Off. I'm James, your host, and I bring you all the news of the week that is worth filling your brain, at least according to me, with no filter, no fluff, and as always, there isn't a political affiliation in sight. Oh boy, do I have a dandy for you tonight. Yeah, I said dandy. I mean, if you can't get riled up by one of these topics today, you've either had a lobotomy or you lost your pulse. And I decided to put in a through line to all the topics this week, a way they could all intertwine. Each topic and segue will relate to doing, looking, or thinking about something in a different way. We'll hit on Venezuela and the global mess we stirred up down there. Then we will look into Minnesota fraud, which should have surprised, well, nobody. I will follow that up by doing a huge cannonball into the healthcare premium pool. And then I will finish off with why Gen Zers want to do like Cher and turn back time on internet innovation. If I could turn back time, if I could find a way. But before we shift this thing into top gear, let's get into the comment of the week. I am giving this comment once again to George VERSLIUS 8442. It seems that George is really good about making me come up with differential diagnoses, so that's always a positive. So George says, I support Trump. We need to take back our America. Thanks again for the comment, George, and with this one, I honestly agree. A whole lot of things we've done in the past have not worked out the way that we were promised. So yeah, when somebody tries something different, I don't think that rooting for failure helps anybody. That does not mean blind loyalty, though. It just means that we don't actively sabotage ourselves. Elections happen, and these are the people in office for their terms no matter what. We made our bed, we sleep in it, whether we like the thread count or not. But we as people need to try something different too, because loving your country is not the same as loving your government. Far from it, actually. And accountability does not stop with politicians. It actually starts and ends with us as citizens, because we're the ones that vote. We're the ones that amplify. We're the ones to decide what behaviors get excused. That is how democracy actually works. That is what our America is, George. And it's not just people that agree with us. Oh no. It's people who challenge us. People who see things different. People we have to live with, work with, and build a future with. So yeah, love your country. Question your leaders. And if you voted for them, you should be more objective with your critiques than people that didn't. Not because you hate them, but because you endorsed them. And you can never use the excuse that, hey, I didn't vote for them, so it's not my fault. You agreed to democracy. All of us did. And so we are all responsible. But thanks for the comment, George. I'm glad you're sticking around to watch more content. Anyone can get their thoughts on the comment of the week. Their only requirement, you have to leave one. On to the main segment. So if you've been watching Venezuela the last week, then you have heard the name Maduro. He's the president that we went down with the Delta team and captured and brought back and now have detained in New York awaiting trial. The other name you are hearing is Rodriguez. Delcy Rodriguez, interim president. But that name and her ideology did not start in a government building. It started in the 1970s. With a kidnapping, a guerrilla movement, and what I like to call peak Cold War decision-making. I will paint the picture. Back in 1976, a U.S. executive named William Niehaus gets kidnapped in Venezuela. Now, he wasn't a spy or a general. He was a glass company executive, because nothing screams topple an empire like packaging materials. A Marxist guerrilla group takes him and accuses him of being CIA, because apparently in the 1970s, everybody was CIA. And they hold him for over 3 years. This wasn't a crime. This was an ideology. If we kidnap enough capitalists kind of thinking, then the entire system will collapse. One of the people tied to the planning of this kidnapping was a fellow named Jorge Antonio Rodriguez, a radical leftist leader, founder of the Social League. He's arrested later that year and dies in custody. The government says heart attack. The autopsy says that's not what a heart attack usually looks like. To the Venezuelan left, he becomes a martyr. To the United States and the state of Venezuela, he becomes a loose end that got tied up. And here's the part that history books love to footnote. but not headline. You guessed it. Jorge Antonio Rodriguez was Delcy Rodriguez's father. Boom, boom, boom. Fast forward a few decades. The revolutionaries are not hiding in jungles anymore. They are wearing suits, have titles, and have press secretaries. Delcy Rodriguez rises through the system. Foreign minister, vice president, now interim president. Her brother runs the National Assembly. Now, for most of the last century, the U.S. policy towards Latin America was pretty straightforward. Don't like the leader? No worries. Remove the leader. Coup d'etats, backroom deals, strongmen we put into power who magically align with U.S. interests the moment we met them. Sometimes it worked. Most of the time, it aged terribly. Because it turns out whenever you overthrow governments, you don't change history. You just delay it. Here's what's different today, what we're not doing anymore, that great big experiment I was talking about. Yes, we still kidnapped a country's leader, but we're not replacing him with a friendlier guy this time. No more, don't worry, this guy went to college in Ohio. Although the new vice president that Rodriguez appointed did get a master's from Rice University and from Columbia both. Yeah. Anyway, we are trying something radical. We're letting leaders we don't like stay. And yeah, I know that feels a little counterintuitive because controlling your enemies, that's not easy to do. But here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody likes to say out loud. The instability didn't start when we stopped interfering. It started whenever we thought that interference didn't count. You don't create martyrs, disappear people, and destabilize countries and then act shocked whenever their kids grow up and are running the place. Delcy Rodriguez didn't come out of nowhere. She came out of history that we never finished dealing with. This isn't about supporting Venezuela's leadership, though. It's about two things. One, trying to keep things stable so we can access the 303 billion barrels of oil underneath Venezuelan soil. And two, admitting that the old playbook about stealing another country's natural resources doesn't work anymore. We tried force, now we're going with patience. Not sure if it will work out, but maybe this Rodriguez lady doesn't blame the U.S. for torturing and killing her father 50 years ago still. Or maybe she doesn't think that we were involved. Sure, maybe she has forgiven us. Maybe she has forgotten. In the meantime, I'm sure that everybody involved will be more than happy to let ExxonMobil and Chevron and Shell and everybody else go down and spend billions of tax dollar money to rebuild Venezuela's oil infrastructure. Let's just hope that whenever all the rebuilding is done, that Ms. Rodriguez's amnesia doesn't suddenly disappear. And then she go back to being what she has been her entire life, a socialist that wants to nationalize her entire country's wealth. Because then we would be talking about a very expensive and very prolonged U.S. war again. Let's get into some back 9/11. Dating at our age, we don't meet people. We meet patterns. On a date, we are not saying, "Tell me about yourself." We are consciously asking ourselves, "How does this one end?" Because we all say we want something different, but we keep ordering the same person off the menu. Same vibe, same red flags, different name sometimes. So maybe the goal should not be to try something new, not chasing sparks anymore. Because at this age, sparks usually mean that something's about to catch fire. Ask yourself, do I feel calm around this person? Or do I feel like I'm trying to explain myself to a jury? Trying something different in dating after 40 isn't settling. It's finally admitting that chaos isn't chemistry. It's just the type that we're used to. It may work, it may not. Worst case scenario, you're back on Tinder in 3 to 5 business days. All right, let's talk about Minnesota for a second. And no, I'm not talking about the tragic shooting that could have been prevented. I'm talking about the $500 million worth of fraud story that got pushed to the back burner because of the shooting. And let's get this straight. Minnesota is not the problem. Minnesota just got caught. Here's the short version. A social department there that was supposed to be overseeing and administrating behavioral and social grants was handing out millions of dollars with paperwork that was, let's just say, optional. In one case, a single person approved over $600,000 worth of grant money and then later went to work for the very organization that received that money. Now pause right there. That's not a clerical error. That's not an oops, I forgot a form. That is a revolving door doing exactly what revolving doors do. And before anybody turns this into a red state, blue state thing, don't. Because this isn't a Minnesota thing. This is an everywhere thing. What Minnesota shows us isn't corruption. We already know that corruption is there. What this shows us is how easy it is. These agencies are generally understaffed, or they're overstaffed with people that are just complicit or incompetent. Both are equally as bad. They are under pressure and they are drowning in money that has to be spent. Grants need to go out. Deadlines need to be hit. Programs need to show impact. So what happens? Oversight becomes a wink and a nod. Paperwork becomes trust, and trust becomes very profitable for the wrong people. And here's the part that should make you shift in your seat. This didn't require hacking or bribery or secret meetings in a parking garage. It required one person with authority, weak verification, and zero meaningful follow-up. That's it. And if you think your state doesn't do this, it does. If you think your city doesn't do this, it does. If you think the federal government isn't doing this same thing but on steroids, please. But the real issue isn't fraud, it's design. We've built a system where spending money is rewarded with more money. Stopping spending is punished with budget cuts. And accountability only shows up after the money's gone, if ever. So when people say, how does this keep happening? That's how. And look, this isn't about killing social programs. This isn't about saying never help anyone. This is about saying if you're going to take public money, then the public gets receipts. Actual receipts. Not, don't worry, we'll get them at some point. Not promises. Not trust us, the money's going to go to a good cause. Receipts. Because every dollar that gets skimmed here is a dollar that doesn't go to somebody that actually needs it. And every time this gets brushed off as an isolated incident, it just gets easier the next time. Minnesota didn't invent this. They are just the most recent clear example. And honestly, if we are serious about accountability, then we should be praising these states that expose it and then asking why the same audit isn't happening everywhere else. Because I promise you, this story does not end in St. Paul, Minnesota. Woo! I'm starting to get a little hot there. All right, let's cool off with the Nostalgic News Minute. Good evening. I'm sitting at this desk tonight to bring you what officials are calling a bold new direction for the 1970s and beyond. After decades of doing things the same way, the United States has announced that it is ending the gold standard. That's right. No more dollar, backed by gold. From here on out, we're backing it with confidence. Administration officials say this will give the economy, and I'm quoting, more flexibility and room for growth expansion. We are assured that this idea is modern, necessary, and completely under control. Tonight it seems Americans do not have to worry. Markets will adjust, prices will stabilize, and any consequences will be dealt with later. This has been your Nostalgic News Minute. I'm James Roberts reminding you, it's just dirty paper. There's already a lot of talk this year about healthcare premiums rising. Oh yeah, it bites like a snake. And all the billing and policies and explanations about why they go up always are so complicated. Well, I thought about an analogy that makes explaining this a whole lot simpler. You see, healthcare is expensive for the same reasons that bad home renovations are expensive. Too many people doing small parts and nobody overseeing the whole job. If you've ever remodeled a house, then you know this feeling. You hire one contractor, but then suddenly you've got a plumber, an electrician, a drywall guy, a materials rep, an inspector, and 3 guys you don't even know standing in your kitchen. I guess each one of them has a reason to be there, but every one of them is definitely sending a bill. I was actually talking to my dad the other day about a friend of our family that has had a lot of health problems in the last 5 years. And he told me that after his first diagnosis, since then, he has had 51 MRIs. Think about that. That's like remodeling a bathroom and every contractor insisting on their own measurements and then insisting on remeasuring to confirm their first measurements. 1 MRI, that makes sense. 2, just fine. 3, not a problem. But 50 friggin' 1? At some point, whenever you stack them all up, you have to think to yourself, am I paying for health care or am I paying for repetition? Another quick example. My father, he had a heart valve replacement about a year ago. One of those that went right up the leg. It took an hour to do. We're sitting in a waiting room afterwards for them to explain to us exactly what's going on and his condition and all that. Whenever they come in, I swear it looked like a construction crew coming for a one-man job. Doctor, surgeon, anesthesiologist, anesthesiologists, medical device rep, nurse practitioner, nurses, orderlies. Hell, I even think that a hospital chaplain came there, and my dad's an atheist. And we're sitting in this little tightly packed room, and all I could think about is that old joke about how many electricians does it take to change a light bulb? 3, 1 to hold the bulb and 2 to turn the room. But this joke was how many medical staff does it take to change a valve? The answer? However many adds up to $5 million in annual salaries. Whenever we walked out of that little room back into the waiting area, the people sitting there must have thought they were at the circus watching a dozen clowns jump out of a car. Now, I'm sure every one of those staff had a reason to be there, or at least an excuse. But if this were your house, you'd be standing there thinking, why is everyone here? And why am I paying for all of them? That's healthcare. Extra scans, extra tests, extra prescriptions, extra people, extra steps. And each layer adds costs. None of them remove anything. Nobody's role is to say, much less ask, do we need all of this? Is the care of the patient better with all of this? Is the quality of life better for the person with all of this? So when your premiums go up again, it's not because medicine got better. It's because the job site got bigger. And I don't want to sound like I'm against great healthcare, because I'm not. I'm grateful for it. And I'm not against doctors. I think they do great things. I think that people put a little bit too much blind faith into their opinions. I mean, it's the only profession I know that has a 0% success rate and still gets paid. There has never been a single one of them that gives the customer exactly what they ask for, which is not to die. Just another frustrating topic. Let's do the hack trick. All right, it's time for this week's hack trick. 3 little hacks that make you see the world a little different, but in a good way. Hack number 1, take a different route to somewhere you go all of the time. Work, grocery store, gym, hey, it doesn't matter. What matters is the same destination, but a different path. It wakes your brain up without changing your philosophy. Hack number 2, switch hands for one thing every day. Whether it is brushing your teeth, holding your phone, or opening doors. You'll feel ridiculous for about 30 seconds and then weirdly present. That's your brain paying attention again. Hack number 3, change one physical anchor. That means sit in a different chair or park in a different spot. This is a tiny change, but a huge disruption to your autopilot. That's your hack trick, because trying something different doesn't require a new personality, just enough movement to break a pattern. We have to end on something lighter here. After those first 3 segments, I deserve it. It worked me up. So this week, I've actually seen a few articles and social chatter about Gen Zers wanting 2026 to be more like 2016. Not politically, not economically, culturally. And my first mental response to this was like, oh yeah, now you want to go back. Back before all the self-inflicted drama was brought onto society for no reason. But when I read what they were saying, it actually made sense. They weren't saying that everything was perfect in 2016. They're just saying it was lighter. The internet felt less angry. Social media felt more fun and less like a performance review. Memes were dumb, but in a good way. You could post a cat video without PETA bombarding your thread with shame comments. And you could scroll without feeling like you were being psychologically evaluated by an algorithm. And honestly, the big reason it was like that back then is simple. Investors in tech companies weren't demanding profits yet. Once they were, everything changed, just like that. Every scroll turned into 20 ads. Every pause in a video became a sales opportunity. Every app stopped asking, how can we make this fun, and started asking, how can we monetize this human? The internet didn't get worse because people did. It got worse because somebody had to turn a profit. And that's where this ties into everything else we've been talking about today. Because trying something different doesn't always mean reinventing the future. Sometimes it means we realize we took a wrong turn and just putting it in reverse and going back a little bit. Gen Z isn't asking for new platforms, they're asking for fewer platforms. They're not asking for smarter tech. They're asking for tech that doesn't leave them more irritated after they open it. They don't want everything optimized. They want it enjoyable again. That doesn't sound like naive kids. That sounds like wisdom showing up early. We spent the last decade believing that newer automatically meant better. More features, more speed, more notifications, more options, more noise. And now an entire generation is saying, hey, what if we remove about 20% of that? And I kind of love that the big cultural experiment here isn't collectively saying what's next. It's saying what worked that we abandoned for no good reason. So if 2026 feels a little bit more like 2016, less hostile, a little bit more playful, less performative, that might actually be trying something different in the smartest way possible. that is it for today. Man, I get a little hostile in some of those. But yeah, got through it. Thanks a lot, guys, for your comments. Thanks a lot for your support. Thanks a lot for your subscriptions, all that good stuff. If you haven't done that sort of stuff, go ahead and do it. The next probably month and a half, I'm probably only going to do a teed off episode every 2 weeks because I am actually going back to film school. I left film school in 1999 with just a semester and a half worth of credits left to get my degree. I went and moved to LA rather than finishing up. I'm heading back to it and going to get that degree. And I don't know, maybe go to grad school. Don't know how much will be on my plate, so I'm going to just tone back teed off just to see what's going on and how I can integrate all of this stuff into stuff to make good content for you guys. Plan on not next week because that's the first week of classes. I'm going to see how it goes. The week after, I will definitely get a teed off episode. And then if everything goes well and it ends up being pretty easy for me, I'll go back to doing teed off every week. Thanks again. See you next time.